The silence in the first-class cabin of Flight 409 was deafening. Every eye was fixed on row 1. A smug investment banker sat with a glass of champagne, a victorious smirk plastered across his face, while a 19-year-old girl in a grey hoodie gathered her sketchbook. Humiliated tears stinging her eyes as the flight attendant pointed aggressively toward the economy curtain. They thought they had won. They thought power was about the suit you wore or the color of your skin. But as the girl stood up, a black SUV with diplomatic plates screeched onto the tarmac outside the window, and the pilot's intercom suddenly crackled to life with a trembling voice. The smirk on the banker's face was about to vanish, because that wasn't just a teenager they were bullying. That was the daughter of the man who had just bought the airline's debt, and he was coming up the stairs. The air inside the terminal at JFK International Airport was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the frenetic energy of travelers. But inside the exclusive Meridian Airways first-class lounge, the atmosphere was hushed, smelling faintly of jasmine and old money. Maya Sterling sat in the corner of the lounge, almost invisible against the high-backed velvet armchair. At 19, Maya didn't look like the typical clientele of Meridian's royal class. She wasn't wearing a tailored Chanel suit or dragging a Rimowa suitcase worth more than a used sedan. She wore a slightly oversized vintage Yale hoodie, black leggings, and battered Converse sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and on her lap sat a charcoal-stained sketchbook, where she was furiously shading the contours of a stranger's face from across the room. She looked like an art student trying to catch a standby flight home for the holidays. She certainly didn't look like she held a ticket for Seat 1A, the most coveted spot on the airline's flagship route to London. "Excuse me, miss." Maya looked up. A lounge attendant, a woman named Carol with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, stood over her. "We need to clear this table," Carol said, her tone clipped. "We have platinum members arriving shortly." Maya glanced around. The lounge was at 40% capacity. There were empty tables everywhere. "Oh, I'm sorry," Maya said, her voice soft. "I'm actually waiting to board Flight 409. I thought this spot was okay." Carol's eyes flicked to Maya's backpack, a canvas bag covered in patches. She didn't check Maya's boarding pass. She just made an assumption. "The general waiting area is outside the glass doors, sweetie. This lounge is reserved for first and business class passengers only. I'm going to have to ask you to wait out there." Maya hesitated. She hated conflict. Her father, Robert Sterling, always told her to stand tall. But Maya had spent her life trying to shrink to avoid the spotlight that came with her last name. She reached into her pocket to pull out her ticket, a heavy cardstock pass embossed with gold leaf. "I have a Please don't make a scene." Carol interrupted her voice, raising just enough to draw the attention of a nearby couple. "We have strict dress code guidelines and access rules. Just head to the gate, okay?" Maya felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She could have pulled out the black card. She could have called her father, who was currently wrapping up a meeting in Manhattan and flying out later that evening. But she didn't. She just nodded, grabbed her bag, and walked out. She wasn't going to let one rude employee ruin her trip. She was going to London to accept an award for a graphic novel she'd published anonymously. This was her moment, and she wanted to do it on her own terms. She made her way to Gate B14. The boarding process was already beginning. When they called for first class and diamond medallion members, Maya stepped forward. The gate agent, a harried-looking man named Greg, took her pass without looking up, scanned it, and then paused. The machine beeped a pleasant green tone. He looked at the screen, then at Maya, then back at the screen. "Seat 1A?" Greg asked, eyebrows raising. "Yes," Maya said. "Enjoy your flight, Ms. Sterling," he mumbled, handing it back. He didn't seem to care who she was, just that the machine said yes. Maya walked down the jet bridge, the noise of the terminal fading behind her. She stepped onto the plane and turned left. The first-class cabin on Meridian's new Boeing 777 was a sanctuary. There were only 8 suites each with sliding privacy doors, lie-flat beds, and massive 40-inch screens. Seat 1A was the jewel. It was the bulkhead suite offering extra legroom and 2 windows. Maya stowed her canvas backpack in the overhead bin, ignoring the way it clashed with the polished walnut wood finish of the cabin. She sat down, pulled her knees to her chest, and opened her sketchbook again. She finally felt safe. But the peace was fragile. From the galley, the senior purser was watching her. Her name tag read Sheila, and she had been flying for Meridian for 25 years. Sheila prided herself on maintaining the integrity of the first-class cabin. To her, integrity meant a certain look, a certain demographic, and a certain tax bracket. Maya Sterling did not fit Sheila's definition of integrity. "Check the manifest again," Sheila whispered to the junior flight attendant, a nervous young woman named Chloe. "There's no way that kid is in 1A. That's usually reserved for VIPs or full-fare paying executives." "I checked Sheila," Chloe whispered back. "It says M. Sterling, full fare, paid in cash." Sheila narrowed her eyes, watching Maya scribble in her book. "Sterling probably used a stolen card, or it's a system error. Keep an eye on her. If she so much as sneezes wrong, I want to know." The boarding music played a soft orchestral loop. Maya put on her noise-cancelling headphones, closing her eyes. She didn't see the man who had just boarded the plane. She didn't see the way he stopped in the aisle, staring at her seat with a mix of confusion and rising fury. His name was Preston Holloway. He was a hedge fund manager who had never heard the word no in his life. He was 45, wearing a bespoke Italian suit, and he was already sweating from the walk down the jet bridge. He looked at his boarding pass. Seat 1B. He looked at Seat 1A. He looked at Sheila. "Is there a problem, Mr. Holloway?" Sheila asked, rushing over her smile, practiced and bright. She knew Preston. He was a frequent flyer, a man who tipped poorly, but complained loudly, the kind of passenger the airline feared losing. "Yes, Sheila, there is a problem," Preston said, his voice booming in the quiet cabin. He pointed a manicured finger at Maya. "I specifically requested Seat 1A. My assistant confirmed it this morning. Why is there a teenager sleeping in my seat?" Maya didn't hear him. Her music was too loud. Sheila glanced at Maya, then back at Preston. This was her chance to restore order. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Holloway. Let me see what I can do. There must have been a mix-up at the gate." The mix-up wasn't in the computer. The mix-up was in their assumptions. And as Sheila tapped Maya on the shoulder, the first domino of a catastrophe began to fall. Maya jumped slightly as she felt the sharp tap on her shoulder. She slid her headphones down to her neck, looking up to see 2 faces staring down at her. One was the flight attendant, Sheila, looking stern. The other was a man she didn't know, whose face was rapidly turning a shade of crimson that clashed with his blue tie. "Can I help you?" Maya asked, her voice polite. "You're in my seat," Preston Holloway snapped before Sheila could speak. He didn't make eye contact with her. He looked at the empty air above her head, as if she were a piece of luggage that had been misplaced. "I fly this route twice a month. I always sit in 1A. Maya looked at her ticket, which she had tucked into the seat pocket. She pulled it out. "I'm sorry, sir. My ticket says 1A. She held it up. Preston didn't look at it. He swatted the air dismissively. "Sheila," Preston barked. Fix this. I have a conference call in 2 hours. I need the bulkhead for my setup. And frankly, I don't paid $12,000 to sit next to... He gestured vaguely at Maya's hoodie. Someone who looks like they got lost on the way to the back of the bus. The insult hung in the air. Several other passengers in the cabin lowered their newspapers. A tech CEO in 2A watched with interest. Sheila put on her most sympathetic face for Preston, not Maya. She turned to the girl. Miss... Sheila said, her voice dropping to that condescending pitch adults use with toddlers. It seems there has been a double booking. Mr. Halloway is a global services member. We prioritize our frequent flyers. But I have a ticket, Maya said, her brow furrowing. I bought it. I picked this seat weeks ago. I understand that, Sheila lied smoothly. But the system sometimes makes errors. We have a lovely seat available in economy comfort. Row 12. It has extra legroom. I can move you there right now, and we can offer you a voucher for $50 off your next flight. Maya stared at her. You want me to move to economy? I paid for first class. Look, kid, Preston interrupted, stepping closer, invading her personal space. Let's cut the act. Did you use your daddy's miles? Did you win a contest? People like you don't buy full fare first class. Now be a good girl. Grab your little coloring book and move. You're holding up the flight. Maya felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't the first time she'd been judged for how she dressed or looked, but the blatant disrespect was shocking. My name is Maya, she said, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength. I paid for this seat with my own money. I'm not moving. Preston laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. Your own money drawing cartoons. He turned to Sheila. Get the captain. I'm not sitting until this is resolved. Sheila's patience snapped. She saw Preston Halloway, a man of status, wealth, and power. Then she saw Maya Young, black, dressed casually alone. The calculus in her head was simple. The airline needed Preston. They didn't need this girl. Miss Sterling, Sheila said, her voice hardening. I am giving you a direct instruction from a crew member. You are disturbing the peace of the cabin and delaying the aircraft. If you do not vacate this seat voluntarily, I will have to classify you as a disruptive passenger. I'm not being disruptive, Maya protested, looking around for help. The other passengers looked away, unwilling to get involved. I'm just sitting in the seat I paid for. You are arguing with crew, Sheila said, crossing her arms. That is disruptive. Now grab your bag. I won't ask again. Maya's hand went to her pocket. She gripped her phone. She needed to call her dad. But before she could pull it out, Preston grabbed her backpack from the overhead bin and tossed it onto the floor of the aisle. Move, he shouted. The sound of the bag hitting the floor echoed. A few charcoal pencils spilled out, rolling across the carpet. Maya looked at her pencils, then at Preston. A switch flipped inside her. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. She picked up her phone. She didn't dial 911. She opened her messages and clicked on the contact labeled Dad. She typed 4 words. They're kicking me off. She hit send. Then she looked up at Sheila. I'm not moving, Maya said, her voice deadly calm. And if you touch me or my property again, you're going to regret it. Is that a threat? Sheila gasped, clutching her pearls theatrically. Did you hear that, Mr. Halloway? She threatened me. I heard it. Preston grinned. That's assault. Get the air marshals. Get the police. Get her off this plane. Sheila marched to the intercom phone on the wall. Captain, we have a level 2 threat in first class. Passenger refusing instructions and making threats, requesting removal. The cabin fell silent. Maya picked up her pencils one by one. She didn't cry. She just waited. She knew something Preston Holloway and Sheila didn't. She knew where her father was. Robert Sterling wasn't just a billionaire. He was the founder of Sterling Equity, a private equity firm that specialized in hostile takeovers. He was known in the business world as the silencer because he didn't scream, he didn't shout. He just quietly dismantled you until there was nothing left. And he wasn't in Manhattan. His meeting had ended early. He was currently sitting in seat 4K, the very last seat in the first-class cabin, hidden behind a privacy partition, watching the entire scene unfold through the gap in his suite door. He hadn't intervened yet. Robert Sterling never struck until he had all the evidence. He sat there, his eyes cold as ice, recording the entire interaction on his phone. Sheila walked back to Maya, a triumphant look on her face. "Port Authority police are on their way. You're going to jail, honey." Maya looked past Sheila toward the back of the cabin. She saw the privacy divider of seat 4K slowly slide down. Preston settled into seat 1B, loosening his tie. "Finally," he muttered. "Some service." He had no idea that the man sitting 20 feet behind him was about to turn into a living hell. The arrival of the Port Authority officers was not subtle. Heavy boots thudded against the jet bridge floor, vibrating through the fuselage. 2 officers, Officer Miller and Officer Davis, squeezed through the narrow aircraft door, their faces set in expressions of weary authority. They were used to drunk passengers or unruly disputes, but the scene in first class confused them momentarily. The cabin was silent. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit was sipping a pre-departure scotch, looking annoyed. A flight attendant was standing with her arms crossed, radiating indignation, and a young girl in a hoodie was sitting quietly in seat 1. Clutching a sketchbook, as if it were a shield. "Who's the problem here?" Officer Miller asked, his hand resting instinctively near his belt. "She is," Sheila said immediately, pointing a manicured finger at Maya. "Passenger in 1A. She's refusing crew instructions to vacate a seat that isn't hers. She's been belligerent and made verbal threats against the crew." Maya's eyes went wide. "That is a lie. I never threatened anyone. I just said I would report her if she touched me again." "See?" Preston Holloway interjected, swirling his glass. "She's hysterical. Just get her off the plane, officers. We're already 10 minutes behind schedule, and my time is worth more than this entire aircraft." Officer Miller looked at Maya. He saw a teenager. He saw the hoodie. He didn't see a first-class passenger. He sighed. "Miss," Miller said, stepping into the aisle, "you need to grab your things and come with us." "But I have a ticket," Maya pleaded, holding up the boarding pass again. "Please, just look at it. It's right here. I paid for this seat." Miller didn't look. In his experience, once the flight crew declared a passenger disruptive, the discussion was over. The captain had the final say on who flew, and if the crew said she was out, she was out. The legalities could be sorted out in the terminal. His job was simply to clear the blockage. "Ma'am, we can discuss the ticket at the gate agent's desk," Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. "Right now, you are trespassing on a federal aircraft. If you don't stand up voluntarily, we will have to assist you, and you don't want that." Maya looked at the officers, then at Sheila. Sheila was smiling a small, cruel victory smile. Maya looked at Preston Holloway, who had already opened his laptop, dismissing her existence entirely. She felt tears prick her eyes, hot and stinging. It wasn't the loss of the seat. It was the powerlessness. It was the feeling of being small, of being erased, because she didn't fit the picture of what first class was supposed to look like. "Fine," Maya whispered. She stood up. Her legs felt shaky. She bent down to gather the charcoal pencils that Preston had scattered on the floor. "Leave it," Preston snapped without looking up. "Janitorial can get it." Maya ignored him, picking up the last pencil, a Prismacolor black, and placing it in her bag. She slung the canvas backpack over one shoulder. "Let's go," Officer Davis said, gesturing toward the door. Maya began the walk. It was only 20 feet to the door, but it felt like miles. She had to walk past Preston, who chuckled as she passed. She had to walk past the other passengers in rows 2 and 3, who studiously avoided eye contact, staring at their phones or out the window, complicit in their silence. She reached the galley. Sheila was there, holding the passenger manifest against her chest, like a Bible of rules she had just rewritten. "Maybe next time try Spirit Airlines, honey," Sheila whispered as Maya passed. "You'll fit in better." Maya bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. She stepped across the threshold onto the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit her face. The officers flanked her, treating her like a criminal being escorted to a holding cell. Inside the plane, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The tension broke. "Finally," Preston announced to the cabin. "Sheila, can I get a refill and wipe down that seat? Would you God knows where that bag has been?" "Right away, Mr. Halloway," Sheila beamed, grabbing a hot towel. "I am so sorry for the inconvenience. We'll make sure the rest of your flight is flawless." The pilot, Captain Henderson, announced over the intercom. "Folks, apologies for the delay. We've removed a disruptive passenger, and we should be pushing back in just a moment. Flight time to London is 6 hours and 40 minutes. Sheila bustled about, clearing the generic magazines Maya had touched, fluffing the pillow. She felt powerful. She had protected the brand. She had pleased a high-value customer. She didn't notice that the privacy divider for seat 4K was sliding down. She didn't notice that the tall, broad-shouldered man in the back row had stood up. He wasn't rushing. He moved with a terrifying, predatory slowness. He buttoned his suit jacket, a bespoke Tom Ford that cost more than Sheila's car, and stepped into the aisle. Robert Sterling had seen enough. He walked toward the front of the cabin. The carpet silenced his footsteps, but his presence was loud. He was 6'3", a former college linebacker turned financial titan. He had a scar above his left eyebrow from a corporate hostile takeover that had turned physical in the 90s. Sheila turned around, holding the bottle of champagne, and nearly ran into him. "Oh, sir," she said, startled. "Please take your seat. The seatbelt sign is on." Robert didn't blink. He didn't sit. He looked at Sheila with eyes that were dark, calm, and utterly devoid of mercy. "You won't be pushing back," Robert said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but heavy, like a stone dropping into a well. Sheila blinked. "Excuse me." "The plane," Robert said, pointing to the cockpit door. "It isn't going anywhere. Open the door." "Sir, you need to sit down right now, or what?" Robert interrupted. "You'll call the police. They're already here. Go get them back, and tell the captain to come out here." Preston Halloway, sensing a disturbance in his newly reclaimed peace, looked up from his laptop in seat 1A. "Hey, buddy. Sit down. We're trying to leave." Robert slowly turned his head to look at Preston. It was the look a lion gives a hyena that has wandered too close to the kill. "Mr. Halloway," Robert said. He knew the name. He knew the face. "Enjoying the seat?" Preston frowned. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," Robert said. "But you're sitting in my daughter's seat." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence before. It was the silence of a bomb that had just been armed. Preston's arrogant smirk faltered, twitching at the corner of his mouth. "Your daughter, the girl you just had thrown off this plane like a stray dog," Robert clarified. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up. On the screen was a crystal-clear video. It showed Preston throwing the backpack. It showed Sheila lying about the threat. It showed the sneering disrespect. "I recorded everything," Robert said, "from the moment she boarded until the moment she left. I have 4K video of you, Sheila, fabricating a reason to remove a paying customer. And I have footage of you, Mr. Halloway, assaulting a minor by seizing her property." Sheila's face drained of color. The champagne bottle in her hand suddenly felt very heavy. "Sir, I was following protocol. She was non-compliant." "She was 19, Robert snapped, "and she was frightened, and she was right." He turned to the cockpit door and banged on it with a fist that looked like a sledgehammer. "Captain, open this door." The door clicked and swung open. Captain Henderson, a grey-haired veteran, looked out annoyed. "What is going on out here?" "We are trying to taxi." "You're not going anywhere, Captain," Robert said. "Who are you?" Henderson asked, stepping out, ready to assert his command. "My name is Robert Sterling." The name landed like a physical blow. Captain Henderson froze. Every pilot in the industry knew that name. Robert Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Equity. 2 weeks ago, the financial news had been buzzing with rumors that Meridian Airways, struggling with massive debt, was being bailed out by a private equity firm. The deal hadn't been publicly finalized, but the name on the term sheet was Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," the captain stammered, "I wasn't aware you were on board. We have you listed as a VIP, but you have me listed as a passenger who just watched his child be racially profiled and bullied by your staff," Robert said. He gestured to the empty jet bridge. "Get her back on this plane. Now." "Sir, once a passenger is offloaded to the police, it's a security matter." The captain tried to explain, sweat beading on his forehead. "We can't just—" "Captain," Robert cut him off. "Let me make the economics of this situation very clear for you. I currently hold $400 million of this airline's distressed debt. I am the only reason you have fuel in this jet to begin with. If my daughter does not walk back through that door in 2 minutes, with an apology, I will pull the term sheet before I land in London. I will bankrupt this airline by morning. Do you understand?" The captain's eyes widened. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "Sheila!" The captain barked, his voice cracking. "Get the gate agent. Get the police back here. Now." Sheila scrambled out the door, her heels clicking frantically on the metal. Robert turned back to Preston Halloway. Preston was pale. He worked in finance. He knew who Robert Sterling was. The silencer. The man who destroyed companies for sport. Preston's own hedge fund, Apex Capital, was a mid-sized player compared to the leviathan that was Sterling Equity. "Mr. Sterling," Preston said, his voice trembling, trying to find a conciliatory tone. "Look, I had no idea she was your daughter. She didn't look like she belonged." Robert finished for him, stepping into Preston's personal space. "Because she was wearing a hoodie. Because she's black." No, that's not what I meant." Preston backpedaled, holding up his hands. "It was just a misunderstanding about the seat booking. I thought the system—" "There was no misunderstanding," Robert said coldly. "I bought that seat. I bought seat 1A for her, because it's her favorite. And I bought seat 4K for me, because I wanted her to feel independent while I kept an eye on her. Clearly, I didn't watch closely enough." Robert leaned down, placing both hands on the armrests of seat 1, attrapping Preston. Mr. Holloway, do you know who Apex Capital's largest liquidity provider is? Preston swallowed hard. We bank with Chase, but we have lines of credit with... You have a $300 million revolving credit facility with Vanguard Trust, Robert said. I sit on the board of Vanguard. I had breakfast with the CEO yesterday. Preston stopped breathing. You humiliated my daughter for legroom, Robert whispered. You made her cry. You threw her art supplies on the floor. I can apologize, Preston squeaked. I'll move. I'll go to the back. Right now. You're not going to the back, Robert said, standing up straight and adjusting his cuffs. You're getting off. What? You wanted someone removed from the flight, Robert said. You got your wish, Captain? Captain Henderson was on the phone with the gate. He looked up. Yes, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Holloway is leaving us. He is a security threat. I'm not, Preston shouted, standing up. I paid $12,000. And you're disrupting the peace, Robert said calmly. And unlike my daughters, we actually are being aggressive. At that moment, Sheila returned, breathless. Behind her walked Maya, looking confused and red-eyed, flanked by the same police officers, who now looked terrified because the station manager of JFK was running behind them yelling apologies. Maya stopped at the door. She saw her father standing in the aisle. Dad, she whispered. Robert's face softened instantly. The cold mask of the corporate raider vanished, replaced by the warmth of a father. He walked past Preston, past the captain, and wrapped his daughter in a hug. I'm here, May, he said, using her childhood nickname. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let it go that far. They said I was trespassing. Maya sobbed into his jacket. Everyone stared at me. I know, Robert said, stroking her hair. But we're going to fix it. He turned her around to face the cabin. He looked at Officer Miller. Officer, Robert said, there has been a mistake. The disruptive passenger is not this young woman. It is the man in seat 1A. Officer Miller looked at the captain. The captain nodded vigorously. Mr. Holloway is to be removed immediately. Airline orders. Preston Holloway's jaw dropped. You can't do this. This is illegal. I'll sue. Go ahead, Robert said, guiding Maya back toward seat 1A. My legal team is bigger than your entire company. But right now, you're in my daughter's seat. Preston looked at the police. He looked at the captain. He realized he had 0 allies. The power had shifted so violently, he had whiplash. This is insane, Preston muttered, grabbing his briefcase. You people are crazy. Move. Officer Miller said, far less polite this time. He grabbed Preston's arm. As Preston was led out, passing Maya, he didn't look at her. He looked at the floor. The humiliation was total. He was being walked off the plane in front of the same people he had performed for just minutes ago. Robert waited until Preston was off the jet bridge. Then he turned to Sheila. Sheila was shaking. She knew what was coming. Mr. Sterling, she began, tears welling up in her eyes. I have worked here for 25 years. I have a pension. Please. Robert looked at her name tag. Sheila, he said softly. You judged a book by its cover. You assumed that because she was quiet and dressed down, she was weak. You assumed that because he was loud and in a suit, he was right. He looked around the cabin. That is a failure of character, not just protocol. I don't fire people, Sheila. HR fires people. But I will be sending this video to the head of in-flight services along with my recommendation. He gestured to the door. You're relieved of duty for this flight. The gate agent will find a replacement. Please leave my plane. Sheila gasped. "But we can't fly with one less crew member. The flight will be cancelled." "Then I'll charter a jet for everyone else on board," Robert said, not breaking eye contact. "But you are not flying to London on this aircraft." Sheila looked at the captain for help. The captain stared at the cockpit controls, refusing to engage. Slowly, Sheila unpinned her wings. She placed them on the counter. She grabbed her purse and walked off the plane. Her head hung low, following the man she had tried so hard to impress. Robert turned to Maya. "Sit down, sweetheart." Maya sat in 1A. She looked at the empty seat where Preston had been. She looked at her dad. "Did you really buy the airline?" she asked. "I'm in the process." Robert winked. He sat down on the ottoman in front of her. "Now, are you okay?" "I think so," she said. Then she smiled a small, genuine smile. "You really made the pilot come out. Nobody messes with my artist," he said. But the story wasn't over. The plane took off, but the karma was just warming up. By the time they landed in London, the video Robert had recorded wouldn't just be in an email to HR. It would be viral. And Preston Halloway was about to land in a world of pain that money couldn't fix. While Flight 409 cruised smoothly at 38,000 feet over the Atlantic, a hurricane was brewing on the ground. And the eye of the storm was standing in the middle of Terminal 4 at JFK, screaming into an iPhone 15 Pro Max. Preston Halloway was not used to losing. His entire life had been a series of open doors, firm handshakes, and checks that cleared, standing there watching his luggage circle the carousel alone. Because the airline had offloaded his bags with extreme prejudice, he felt a rage so pure it made his hands shake. "I don't care what the police report says," Preston yelled at his personal attorney, Marcus on the other end of the line. "They kicked me off. I want to sue Meridian Airways for breach of contract, defamation, and emotional distress. I want that flight attendant fired. I want that girl's father destroyed." "Preston, calm down," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Who exactly was the father?" "You said his name was Sterling. Robert Sterling. Some self-important suit. Said he bought the airline's debt." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Marcus. Are you there?" "Preston," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you say Robert Sterling, as in Sterling Equity?" "Yes." "So what?" "He's just a guy." "He's not just a guy, Preston. He's the silencer. He dismantled Goliath Industries last year in 3 days because the CEO insulted his wife at a charity gala. If you went up against Robert Sterling, you need to check your email, now." Preston pulled the phone away from his ear and opened his email app. His inbox was usually flooded with trade confirmations and meeting invites. Today, it was flooded with Google alerts. Alert viral video. Racist banker and flight attendant bully teen on Meridian Flight 409. Alert. Trending on X. Hashtag boycott Apex Capital. Alert Wall Street Journal. Sterling Equity founder Robert Sterling live tweets incident from mid-air. Preston's blood ran cold. He clicked the first link. It wasn't just the video Robert had taken. It was a compilation. Apparently the tech CEO in Seat 2A had also been recording. The video showed everything. The sneer. The back of the bus comment. The throwing of the art supplies. And then the glorious cinematic moment where Robert Sterling stepped out of the shadows like an avenging angel. The video already had 4.2 million views. It had been posted 40 minutes ago. Preston scrolled to the comments. "I know this guy. That's Preston Halloway from Apex Capital. He denied my small business loan last year because he said my demographic was high risk. Imagine being that rich and that insecure. Fire him into the sun. Apex Capital. Pulling my money out immediately. Marcus, Preston choked out. Fix this. I can't fix this, Preston, Marcus said. I'm looking at CNBC right now. The ticker at the bottom of the screen. It says Apex Capital is facing a liquidity crisis because major investors are pulling out. Robert Sterling didn't just post the video. He made calls. Meanwhile, in the quiet luxury of the upper atmosphere, the mood in the first-class cabin had transformed. The tension that had gripped the plane was gone, replaced by a sense of communal justice. The flight attendants, the new ones who had replaced Sheila and her team, were treating Maya not just like a passenger, but like royalty. They brought her sparkling cider in a crystal flute. They brought her the dessert menu before dinner was even served. But Maya wasn't eating. She was sitting on the ottoman of her father's suite. He had insisted she take one, while he took 1B Preston's old seat sketching. Robert watched her. He had a glass of scotch in his hand, but he wasn't drinking it. He was watching his daughter with a mixture of pride and guilt. You have a good line, Robert said, nodding at her sketchbook. Maya looked up. She was drawing the view out the window, the wing cutting through the moonlight. Thanks, Dad. It's a lot better than the last sketch. I'm sorry, Maya, Robert said, his voice gruff. I shouldn't have played games. I thought if I sat in the back, you'd feel more like an adult. Like you were doing this on your own. You didn't think people would be like that. Maya finished for him. She put her pencil down. Dad, people are always like that. You just don't see it because everyone knows who you are. When you walk into a room, you're Mr. Sterling. When I walk in, I'm just a black girl in a hoodie. Robert tightened his grip on the glass. That changes today. I'm buying the airline Maya, not just the debt, the whole thing. I made the decision 10 minutes ago. Maya laughed, a genuine bubbling sound. You bought an airline because a flight attendant was mean to me. I bought an airline because the culture is rotten, Robert corrected, and because I need to make sure that no one ever treats you or anyone else like that again. Sheila is just a symptom, the system that let her think she was right. That's the disease. He tapped his phone. Also, I may have destroyed Mr. Holloway's career while you were eating your warm nuts. Maya raised an eyebrow. What did you do? I called the CEO of Vanguard Trust, Robert said casually. I reminded him that Apex Capital violates their ethics clause regarding reputational risk. They froze his credit lines 10 minutes ago. By the time we land in London, Mr. Holloway won't be a hedge fund manager. He'll be a liability. Maya looked at her dad. You're scary sometimes. Only to the bad guys, kiddo. Robert winked. Now get some sleep. You have an award to accept tomorrow, and I want you to look fresh when you walk up on that stage. Maya reclined her seat into a bed. She pulled the duvet up to her chin. For the first time in hours, she didn't feel small. She felt protected. But more than that, she felt seen. Heathrow Airport usually felt like a chaotic mall, but when Flight 409 taxied to the gate, the reception was unusual. As the plane docked, the jet bridge didn't just have a gate agent, it had a reception committee. The frantic text messages Robert had sent from the air had reached the Meridian Airways London team. They knew the owner was on board, and they knew exactly how badly the New York team had screwed up. When the door opened, the station manager for London, a British woman named Eleanor, with impeccable posture, was waiting. Mr. Sterling, Eleanor said, bowing her head slightly. Ms. Sterling, on behalf of the London team, welcome. We have a private car waiting on the tarmac to bypass immigration queues. Robert nodded. He looked fresh, his suit unwrinkled. Maya, still in her hoodie, looked around nervously. Is the press here? She whispered. Not for you, Robert said. For the story. He was right. As they exited the private terminal, a wall of paparazzi was waiting behind the barriers. But they weren't shouting Maya's name. They were shouting questions about the airline. Mr. Sterling, is it true you're firing the entire board? Mr. Sterling, what do you have to say to Preston Holloway? Robert paused before getting into the waiting Rolls-Royce. He turned to the cameras. He didn't smile. He just adjusted his tie. Meridian Airways will be under new management effective immediately. Robert said, his voice carrying over the shutter clicks. We will be prioritizing dignity over profit. And as for Mr. Holloway, I believe the market has already spoken. He ducked into the car. Maya followed, sliding into the soft leather seats. Showtime, she whispered. The Golden Brush Awards were held that evening at the Tate Modern. It was the Oscars of the graphic novel and illustration world. The room was filled with eccentric artists, wealthy collectors, and critics in black turtlenecks. Maya had changed. The hoodie was gone. In its place, she wore a stunning structural gown in emerald green, a color that made her skin glow. She wore her hair in natural curls, proud and voluminous. She stood by her display. Her graphic novel, The Grey City, was displayed under glass. It was a story about a girl who feels invisible in a world of giants. It's magnificent, a voice said. Maya turned. It was the head judge, a famous French illustrator. The emotion in the lines. It is rare to see such raw vulnerability. Thank you, Maya said, her voice steady. And to think, the judge smiled, you almost missed the ceremony. Maya smiled back. I had a little delay, but my father cleared the runway. Robert stood in the back of the room holding a glass of water. He wasn't mingling. He wasn't networking. He was just a dad watching his daughter shine. He saw the way people looked at her, not with judgment, but with awe. His phone buzzed. It was an email from his assistant in New York. The subject line, Holloway Update. Robert opened it. Boss, it's a bloodbath. Apex Capital's board held an emergency meeting an hour ago. They voted to oust Holloway to save the firm. He's out. No severance. Vanguard pulled the credit line anyway. He's currently being sued by 3 of his LPS for breach of fiduciary duty. Also, the flight attendant, Sheila TMZ, found her. She's claiming she was under pressure, but Meridian released her personnel file. Turns out, she had 4 prior complaints for similar behavior. She's been terminated with cause. She loses her pension. Justice served. Robert closed the phone. He didn't feel joy. He felt satisfaction. It was a clean ledger. On stage, the announcer tapped the microphone. And now, for the most prestigious award of the evening, the Emerging Visionary Award. The winner is Maya Sterling for The Grey City. The room erupted in applause. Maya walked up the steps, her green dress flowing behind her like water. She took the heavy glass trophy. She looked out at the sea of faces. She saw her dad in the back giving her a thumbs up. She leaned into the microphone. Thank you, she said. This book is about being invisible. It's about how easy it is for the world to look right through you because you don't fit their picture of what important looks like. She paused. The room was silent. Today on my way here, someone tried to make me feel small. They tried to tell me I didn't belong in the seat I paid for. They tried to erase me. She gripped the podium. But I learned something today. You don't wait for permission to take up space. You take it, and if they try to move you, plant your feet. The applause was deafening. It wasn't polite clapping, it was a roar. Back in New York, sitting on a hard plastic chair in the arrival hall of JFK, waiting for an Uber because his company car service had cancelled his account, Preston Holloway watched the clip on his phone. He watched the girl he had called trash holding a trophy being cheered by hundreds of people. He looked at his own reflection in the darkened glass of the terminal. He looked tired. He looked old. And for the first time in his life, he looked exactly like what he was, a man who had nothing left but a suit. Suddenly his phone rang. He hoped it was his wife. It wasn't. It was his wife's lawyer. "Preston," the lawyer said coldly. "Linda saw the video. She's taking the kids to her mother's in Connecticut. Do not come to the house tonight." The call ended. Preston dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, cracking the screen. He stared at it, numb. The karma hadn't just hit. It had decimated him. 6 months had passed since the incident on Flight 409. The viral news cycle had moved on to new scandals, new celebrities, and new outrages. But for the people involved in the Sterling incident, as it was now known in business schools and HR training videos, time had not healed anything. It had only solidified the consequences. The fall of the Titan. Preston Holloway sat on a plastic chair in the waiting room of a mid-tier financial consultancy firm in Jersey City. It was a far cry from the glass-walled corner office in Manhattan he had occupied for a decade. The view here wasn't of Central Park. It was of a grimy brick wall and a dumpster. He tugged at his collar. His suit was the same Tom Ford he had worn on the plane, but it hung loosely on him now. He had lost 20 pounds, and not the good kind of weight loss. It was the gaunt look of stress insomnia and a diet of microwave dinners. "Mr. Holloway," a young receptionist called out. She didn't look up from her phone. She didn't call him sir. "That's me," Preston said, standing up too quickly. He walked into the office. The hiring manager was a man named David, 10 years younger than Preston. David didn't offer a handshake. He just pointed to a chair. "I've looked at your resume, Preston," David said, leaning back. "Your numbers at Apex were impressive before the crash." "The market is volatile," Preston said, his voice practiced. "I can turn this branch around. I know how to generate alpha." David sighed. He turned his laptop screen around. It wasn't showing a spreadsheet. It was showing a YouTube thumbnail. The video. "Preston, we're a client-facing firm," David said quietly. "We manage retirement funds for teachers' unions. We manage endowments for charities. If I hire you and a client Googles your name, this is the first thing they see." Preston felt the familiar burning in his stomach. That was a misunderstanding. It was edited out of context. I was the victim of a... "Stop!" David cut him off. "I saw the raw footage. You weren't a victim. You were a bully. And frankly, you're a liability." David stood up. "We can't hire you, Preston. No one on the street will touch you. My advice, change your name. Move to a different industry. Maybe landscaping. Something where you don't have to talk to people." Preston walked out of the building into the grey drizzle. He checked his phone. A notification from Zillow price drop on 42 Oak Drive, his house in the Hamptons. It still hadn't sold. The bank was foreclosing next week. His wife Linda had finalized the divorce last month. She got full custody. She had argued in court that Preston's explosive temper and public instability made him unfit. The judge, who had likely seen the video, agreed. Preston walked to the bus stop. He couldn't afford Uber Black anymore. His credit score was 520. He climbed onto the crowded city bus. It was packed. The only empty seat was in the very back next to the engine, where it was loud and smelled of exhaust. As he walked down the aisle, bumping into people, muttering apologies, he caught his reflection in the window. He looked small. He looked tired. He sat in the back of the bus, clutching his briefcase, finally understanding exactly what he had tried to make Maya feel. He was invisible. He was unwanted. And he had nowhere to go but down. The end of the service. Sheila didn't fare much better. The airline industry is a small world. After Meridian Airways fired her for gross misconduct and violation of the Passenger Bill of Rights. Her name was flagged in the global hiring database. Delta wouldn't hire her. United wouldn't hire her. Even the budget charters politely declined. She was currently working the checkout counter at a discount grocery store in Queens. "Ma'am, this coupon expired yesterday," Sheila said to a customer, a tired-looking woman with 3 kids. "Oh, please," the woman begged. "It's just 50 cents. My kids are hungry." Old Sheila would have rolled her eyes. Old Sheila would have cited policy. Old Sheila would have called a manager. But this was new Sheila. New Sheila knew what it felt like to have the ground fall out from under her. She looked at the woman. She looked at the kids. Sheila reached into her own pocket, pulled out 2 quarters, and put them in the till. "It's fine," Sheila whispered. "I took care of it." "Thank you," the woman said, surprised. "You're very kind." Sheila watched them leave. Her feet hurt. Her pension was gone. She was making minimum wage. But as she stood there, scanning cans of beans, she realized something. She was a better person now. It had taken losing everything to find her humanity, but she had found it. The arrogance was gone, burned away by the shame of millions of strangers judging her. She would never fly first class again, but for the first time in years, she felt grounded. The legacy of Flight 409. While the villains of the story were living their karma, the heroes were building a legacy. Meridian Airways had undergone a complete transformation. Robert Sterling didn't just fire the board. He restructured the company's DNA. He implemented the Sterling Standard, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. He raised the pay for flight attendants and ground crew, arguing that happy employees make happy passengers. But the biggest change was the scholarship. On the 1-year anniversary of the incident, Maya Sterling stood on a stage in the terminal at JFK, the same terminal where she had once been told to wait outside. Behind her was a massive mural she had painted. It depicted a diverse group of people flying not with wings, but with art supplies, books, and musical instruments. "Welcome," Maya said to the crowd. She was 20 now, confident and poised. "A year ago, I was told that I didn't look like I belonged in the front of the plane. Today, my father and I are launching the Seat 1A Foundation." She gestured to the screen behind her. "This foundation will provide full travel grants and art school scholarships to young creators from underrepresented communities. We want to ensure that talent is the only ticket you need to sit at the front." The crowd cheered. Flashbulbs popped. Robert Sterling stood in the front row beaming. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't checking stock prices. He was watching his daughter change the world. After the ceremony, Robert and Maya walked to the gate. They were flying to London again to check on the UK operations. They boarded the plane. It was a new jet. the flagship of the revitalized Meridian fleet. The flight attendant, a young man named Leo, smiled as they approached. He didn't check their clothes. He didn't judge. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling," Leo said warmly. "We have your seats ready." They walked down the aisle. "You want one, eh?" Robert asked. Maya looked at the seat. It was just a chair, leather and foam. It didn't define her value. It never had. "No." Maya smiled. "You take one A, Dad. You look tired. I'll take one B. I want to be right next to you." Robert laughed and patted her shoulder. They sat down. The engines roared to life as the plane lifted off, climbing over the New York skyline, leaving the grime and the noise and the Prestons of the world far below. Maya opened her sketchbook. She didn't draw the view this time. She drew her dad sleeping peacefully in seat 1A. They had won. Not because they had money, and not because they had power. They had won because when the world tried to tell them who they were, they didn't listen. They wrote their own story. And somewhere in Jersey City, Preston Holloway missed his bus. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how one arrogant banker and a judgmental flight attendant learned the hardest lesson of their lives. You never know who you're talking to, and true class has nothing to do with the price of your ticket. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Maya Sterling didn't just get her seat back. She got justice, and Preston Holloway. He lost the only thing that mattered to him, his status, because he couldn't see the value in a human being. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Maya's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind. You never know who's sitting in seat 4K.